Hi, I'm Rachel Hodgdon, President and CEO of the International Well-Building Institute, and I'm thrilled to be here with Frank Giampietro, the Chief Wellbeing Officer for the Americas at EY. So Frank, as you know, our organization, IWBI, is a huge proponent of the CWO, or Chief Wellbeing Officer, or Chief Wellness Officer by any other name. Yep. Quite simply, we think that if you want to take human health and well-being seriously, you got to make it someone's full-time job. And we're big advocates for a permanent position in the C-suite for folks who are playing roles like yours. So tell us, what does a day in the life of a CWO at EY look like? Thanks, Rachel.
So I'm about 2 months into the role. So each day's been pretty interesting. We're lucky. I'm particularly lucky stepping into this role at EY because we've been on this journey for almost a decade. We've got amazing programs and resources and tools in place for our folks. So we're not starting this with the addition of my role and me stepping into that role. But when we went through the pandemic, like many other organizations, we used it as an opportunity to step back and say, hey, what do we want that employee experience to look like on the back end of this? What's really important to our people? And there are really 3 priorities that came out of that conversation. One was around growth and learning. One was around flexibility. And the loudest was really around well-being. So even though we're a decade into this journey and we're really focusing on our people, they're still telling us we have a longer road to go. And so a lot of the beginning of my stepping into the role was doing more and more listening and making sure we really understood where were the programs and resources and tools that were being effective, and where did we have other opportunities? And then additionally, what was the rest of the environment that we needed to address? What did we need to do from a culture perspective, a behavior perspective, and an environmental perspective? And that is really where a lot of my effort is going to be focused on. And so we say, it's time we put the we in well-being, that we really need to attack this together and not make individuals accountable for well-being, but make all of us accountable for each other's well-being.
I love that, put the we in well-being. I also just really am enamored with that idea of the listening tour, because historically participation in workplace wellness programs is abysmally low. And I think a lot of that just has to do with those programs and offerings not being well tailored to the population that they serve. How are you seeing the work that you lead show up across your company's performance? And is it part of how EY is leading when it comes to its own ESG metrics?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, unfortunately, in a lot of organizations, people think about business performance and they think about well-being. And they almost think they need to make a choice. Am I going to focus on delivering the results, or am I going to focus on my people and their well-being? It's a false choice. We know that. The data and research tells us that. What we're trying to do is educate our leaders to understand when we take care of our people, they take care of our clients and they take care of the business. And one of the ways we're doing that is with the introduction of a well-being index. So it's a dashboard that sits on all of our leaders' desktops that gives them information about the experience of their people from a well-being perspective. How are those people feeling about their own well-being across 9 dimensions? But in addition to that, we look at the operational indicators that allow them to understand what's happening in the business right now that might be causing well-being to be high or low, and then what's the consequence of that? What could that mean from an attrition perspective, from a performance perspective, et cetera? So we're really trying to educate how well-being sits in the center of this spectrum from a performance perspective.
Fascinating. Okay, so last question for you. You meet another CWO, and definitely you're at the beginning of this new frontier of Chief Wellbeing Officer. So what are the 3 pieces of advice that you would offer them as they're getting started in their job?
Well, I'm glad that the first resonated with you, which is I think it's really important to listen, right? I mean, I think well-being is very individual. And in an organization like ours, like many others, there's so much diversity in terms of the generation, the caregiver responsibilities. You really have to understand each of the parts of your population and what their needs are. And that's not a one and done exercise, it's ongoing. So I think that's really first and foremost. 2 is really then assessing where can we have the biggest impact? How can we show people that we really mean what we're saying, that we've put this role in place, but it's followed by a set of actions. So what are the 1 or 2 or 3 things that you want to accomplish right off the bat? And then I think the third is really getting your leaders to understand that well-being is a business priority. It's really a business imperative. So if you're going to do that, then you have to measure it and you have to sustain it in a way that you would with any other business metric. I really look at that last piece as we think about long-term value and we think about ESG. We're going to see well-being move to the forefront as that kind of long-term view of whether we have a sustainable model in terms of how we're managing our workforce.
I love it. So listen, assess for impact, and then measure and monitor to hold yourself accountable.
Really well said.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being with us today, Frank, and thanks for being with us at NASDAQ.
Thanks for taking the time.